In 1913, 11 million tons of coal were exported from here to the four corners of the globe. This is Barry, and at the beginning of the 20th century, it was the biggest coal port in the world. Before these docks were built, there was nothing here but countryside and a few small hamlets. Barry Island, just over there, was just an island, a place best known as a destination for pilgrims. The docks changed all that, linking the island to the mainland and attracting a new type of pilgrim. Barry Island became the Blackpool of South Wales, a magnet for day trippers with its less holy offerings of chips and ice cream. Now Gavin and Stacey has given Barry a new celebrity. And if you asked, oh, what's occurred in Barry's history, the answer would be quite a lot. Barry lies on the South Wales coast, about 9 miles to the west of Cardiff. The town and the island together have a population of 47,000. But how did it come to be here, and what or who was Barry?
So we shall follow for this first part of our Thanksgiving for the life of St Barrack, this short order of service here. To be the loud voice.
It's said that Barry is named after Saint Barrack, a 6th century Welsh saint. And today, the 27th of September, is St Barrack's feast day. And on this day every year, the faithful of Barry Island gather to commemorate him. Geraldus Cambrensis writes about the legend of St Barrack, a young monk who forgot one of his master's books and was sent back by boat to retrieve it. The unfortunate Barrack drowned and was washed up on Barry Island. It's said the book was miraculously discovered inside a large salmon, remarkably free from all injury by water. For centuries afterwards, Barry Island was an important site of pilgrimage, and thousands of bodies were brought across the sands at low tide to be buried on what was then an isolated, mysterious island. There's no actual proof that Barrack ever existed, and his tale is more than a little fanciful. But there is evidence that Barry had been settled for many thousands of years. The Romans were here in the 1st century, in the age of Hadrian, the emperor who built the wall up north. And just above the shoreline here lie the remains of another structure built in his time. It was discovered in the 1960s by a local schoolboy. Howard Thomas was only 16 when he saw something unusual lying in the ground near the beach.
I was walking past the Water's Edge Hotel, which was then being built, and I noticed on the ground there were foundation walls with Roman bricks lying around. I made a note of it, and the developers they got in touch with me, and they told me that it was of no consequence.
But the teenage Howard Thomas wouldn't let it go. He eventually graduated from Cambridge as an archaeologist, and 20 years after that first discovery, he took part in a full-scale excavation of the site. It revealed a much larger building than anyone could have imagined. So what have we got, Howard? Nice little Roman villa by the sea?
It's a classic Italian house, 22 rooms round an inner courtyard, which was surrounded by a veranda. And it's most likely to be an official inn for travelling civil servants. He'd probably stay overnight, have a hot bath, and then horses would be provided, and then he would gallop inland with the dispatches.
What's this then?
It's a Roman tile,
yeah,
and it's got a footprint of a Roman on it, the actual footprint.
Oh, yeah.
A hobnail sandal, and the person walked across the brickyard when the bricks were still soft before they were fired, and left a footprint on it. It's just typical Roman hobnail sandal.
After the Romans departed, leaving only their footprints behind, the big events of history passed Barry by. There were Viking raids, and the Normans settled there, but for centuries the area was just sparsely populated farmland. There were 3 small villages, Barry, Merthyr Dyfan and Cadoxton, and there are still traces in today's modern town of these villages' more rural existence. This is Cadoxton Court, a Victorian rectory, right alongside something a lot older. This dovecote was built in the 13th century. It has roosts for 1,400 birds. They were kept for eggs, meat, and as a status symbol to show off to the neighbours that you really were somebody. And a short dove flight away from Cadoxton Court is another part of Barry's hidden history. Nestling amongst the modern seafront apartments is a thatched cottage dating from Tudor times. The owner, Tom Kendrick, showed me where the original occupants left their mark. Wow.
Yes, so this is Jane Andrews, married to Alexander Grant in about 1585.
The flowers?
The flowers, they are kind of traditional. 3 flowers like that indicates it's a marriage portrait, yeah? There probably would have been the groom next to her.
She looks young, doesn't she?
She does, yeah, very young, you know. But they married young, I think, in that period, you know. 15 years old, perhaps.
There she is, Jane Andrews, 430 years old.
Preserved for posterity, yeah. Yes, yeah. Very nice.
Yeah.
It's one of the nice things about old houses.
By the second half of the 1800s, much of the landscape of South Wales had been changed dramatically. The Industrial Revolution was in full flow, but Barry and its island remained an isolated backwater. This is a photo taken in the early 1880s, and it shows farmland and Barry Island surrounded by water. The census of 1881 reveals just 85 people living here. 10 years later, this landscape too had been transformed, largely thanks to one man. David Davis Llandinam was a true self-made man. Born into poverty in mid-Wales, he made his first fortune building railways, before digging some of the most profitable mines in the Rhondda. But all of Davis's coal had to go through the docks in Cardiff, owned by the Marquis of Bute. These Cardiff docks were chock-a-block, and Bute charged a premium, a penny a tonne, to use them. The self-made Davis hated paying his dues to the aristocratic Bute. His solution was simple. He'd build his own port, and the place he chose was Barry. Although Davis was one of the wealthiest men in Britain, he still had to get his plans through Parliament. Bute and his influential friends stymied the first attempt, but at the second reading, the bill was passed and Barry Docks got the green light. Construction started on November the 14th, 1884, and remarkably, it was completed less than 5 years later, an extraordinary engineering achievement. A causeway was built to the island to create the docks, linking Barry Island to the mainland for the first time since the Ice Age. The official opening in July 1889 was a grand affair, with David Davis welcoming over 2,000 guests. To keep a close eye on their business, the owners of Barry Docks built this imposing office high on the hill above their creation. Opened in 1898, it's supposed to be a calendar building with 365 windows for the days of the year and 52 rooms, one for every week. David Davis died a year after the docks were opened, but his audacious plan worked far better than even he could have imagined. By 1897, Barry had overtaken Cardiff, and by 1913, it was the biggest coal port in the world, with 11 million tons of coal passing through and 4,000 ships using the docks. It's not hard to imagine the directors standing here, counting their ships in and out, counting their fortunes as well. The docks brought thousands of people to live and work in the new town. They came from across Wales, Britain and beyond. Historian Deirdre Beddoe was born and still lives in Barry, Her father and grandfather worked in the docks.
This dock was surrounded by coal hoists, 30 odd of them, where the coal went straight into the hold of the ship. I mean, it was an exciting place. People came in from all over, from other parts of Wales, like my mother's mother, from Llandidoch in Cardiganshire, but her husband was from Bristol. His father came as well, and he was from Bristolian. He brought his wife from Germany on his ship. And that's just one side of my family. My grandfather worked on the dock, my father worked on the dock. And for me, living on the sea meant I always seemed to look out to that wider world. I thought that was much more exciting. I could tell you, because I had a little book with all the distances given from port to port. I could tell you in those days the distance between the port of Bari and Buenos Aires or Caracas, but I had no idea where Bangor or Bala was.
19th century Bari was full of shops, grand houses and schools, all built at almost American speed, according to a local paper. Even though it was a boom town, Bari was built to last, and its late Victorian splendour is still visible today. The Tabernacle Chapel, built in 1894, was, and remains, the heart of the town's Welsh-speaking community. The grandest of Bari's civic buildings is the Town Hall and Library, opened in 1903. But what sort of town was Bari at the beginning of the 20th century? Historian and broadcaster Di Smith went to school in Bari and still lives there today.
Bari's expansion at the end of the 19th century is truly incredible. 400 people, a sleepy little village, the docks come, 40,000 people within 20 years. It is dynamic, it is radical, it is rough, it is tough, but it's also a place that is looking for a deeper sense of belonging, and that is, I think, what makes Bari unique. It's a town out of time in that sense. It's a meteor that flashes across the Welsh sky. It's different from the growth of the Welsh valleys, because that's over a longer period of time. Bari just happens.
The railway was crucial to the history of the town, bringing millions of tons of coal down from the valleys and out to the world. It's said that in those days you could walk all the way from Bari to Pontypridd along the tops of coal wagons waiting to be unloaded. Nowadays, there's very little left of the railway traffic that used to be crammed into the docks. But these locomotives waiting to be restored give a glimpse of the age of steam. And it wasn't just coal that they pulled into Bari, they also brought people. For centuries, it had only been possible to get to Barry Island at low tide. But when a railway connection was made in 1896, all that changed. The beaches were now accessible to anyone who wanted a cheap day out by the sea. And come they did, in their thousands. The First World War put a stop to the fun. But in the 1920s and 1930s, with the advent of paid holiday leave, numbers went through the roof. In the basement of Bari Library is the archive of the Bari and District News, which gives a first-hand account of the impact on the town of this new mass tourism. Local papers always paint a good portrait of what was going on. A few letters expressing outrage at the beaches being left knee-deep in litter. But here we have August 1937, record crowds at Bari, 120,000 in just one day on a bank holiday in August. They stocked up with lemonade and orange juice, and one trader was much dismayed to find it was absolutely annihilated in 2 hours on a Sunday. He thought he'd bought enough to last a week. Postcards too. Here we have Barry Island in all its splendour. Did they have a good time? Dear Lily, we are having a fine time, and the weather, lovely. Love from Alice. There were fortunes to be made from this new mass tourism. The first owners of the pleasure park were the White brothers in the 1920s, but in a roller coaster turf war, they were outbid by fairground owner Pat Collins, who took over in 1929, and the White brothers were relegated to this smaller site. The sign is still here. The trouble is, it's just not very cosy. The Collins family ran the pleasure park until the 1990s, and Pat Collins's grandson, also called Pat, still runs the rides on the promenade.
The island is the nearest seaside resort to Birmingham in the country. That's why my grandfather actually thought, yeah, we'll have a crack at that. Yeah. And that was it. And then it was unbelievable. People say, oh, there were hundreds of thousands of people. There were, literally.
Then, in September 1939, the crowds were suddenly absent from Barry Island. With fear of invasion, the beaches and funfair were closed. But as a major port, Barry and its people had a vital role to play in the war effort. With its docks and maritime tradition, it was natural that between 1939 and 1945, many men from Barry went to sea. Most joined the merchant navy, bringing supplies to Britain, running the gauntlet of German U-boats. The cost in human lives was great. Proportionally, more merchant seamen from Barry died during the Second World War than from any other seaport in Britain. This is a memorial to nearly 500 men from Barry and the surrounding area who never returned home. In 1943 and 1944, Barry's docks were crucial in the build-up for the D-Day landings. More than 8,000 American soldiers lived in camps around the town. 17-year-old Pearl Bodette worked for the Americans in the docks.
They were homesick, a long way from their family, from their friends, in a perfectly strange country. I mean, they'd landed from the land of plenty into austerity, rationing, blackout.
There were many black soldiers in Barry. Pearl was shocked by the discrimination they faced from their fellow Americans.
Of course, being a gregarious staff, you know, we'd always want to say, hello, how are you? You know, and we got told off. You know, you weren't supposed to talk to them. Well, of course, that didn't go down very well with us coming from Barry. I mean, our school friends had a different colour skin to us.
One American meant more to Pearl than any other. Gerald Bodette was a warrant officer who she met through her work.
You know, when we did have any time off, we'd go to the pictures, you know. But it was obvious we were getting very attached to each other. And he was a very special person.
Pearl and Gerald were married, but soon afterwards he had to leave to take part in the D-Day landings. Despite the secrecy, he got a message back to her.
He phoned me in the office, and of course we'd been sworn to no contact, no... so that was the 6th of June. And he rang because my birthday's the 7th of June. So he rang up to wish me a happy birthday.
But that was the last time Pearl, who was expecting Gerald's child, ever spoke to her husband. Like many wartime marriages, it was short-lived.
And Rhys Airport, near Cardiff, is easily the most important airport in Wales.
The Second World War had another lasting effect on Barry. In 1942, Rhys had been selected as a training station for Spitfire pilots, and by the 1950s was established as Wales' first airport, with flights to Ireland and France. But for most, foreign holidays were a far-off dream, and Barry Island was busier than ever.
When we used to have the miners' fortnight, you couldn't count the people. There was like, it'd be 200 coaches in the car park. There'd be rail excursions coming from everywhere, even England, Manchester, Liverpool, London, all from the valleys. And I don't know how this island didn't sink in the amount of people that were here.
Still, we had the railway, which were bringing in trainloads and trainloads, and even I can witness it. On a bank holiday Monday in the early 60s, I would stand on the top of the scenic railway and watch lines of trains coming in, dropping off, pulling back out. In, out, in, out. It was mind-blowing.
These thousands of people needed feeding, and what else would they eat but fish and chips? The O'Shea family have been selling fish and chips on Barry Island since 1946. Barbara O'Shea remembers the early days.
They'd get off the bus and it was like a tidal wave. They used to come down the road where they'd stop and they'd buy their posh hats with "Kiss Me Quick" on and that sort of thing. When we'd just come out of a war, the vast majority of people, it was like coming to heaven. Before we finished the day's work, we then had to sit down by a great big zinc bath and hand peel potatoes ready for the next day because we had no peelers.
All by hand?
All by hand. We didn't even have a chip and a
hand chipper.
The old-fashioned hand chippers.
Yeah. Business got even better when Butlins arrived in 1966, and an extra 7,000 people stayed on the island every week. Broadcaster and writer Gwyn Thomas caught the appeal of Barry perfectly in this BBC film from 1969.
This place to which we came once a year for one day as a reward for Sunday school obedience glowed like a healing radium through all our dreams. Here the sea hinted at a possible escape into infinity. Hills did not block out the sky. Men did not vanish into holes in the ground. To my eyes and ears, Barry Island still wears the past like a robe of rustling laughter.
Thomas was a teacher at the town's grammar school. Barry's schools were renowned both for the quality of their staff and the success of their pupils.
And the headmaster, the great headmaster of Barry Grammar School from the 1890s, Edgar Jones, and his daughter, who then runs the grammar school, the girls' grammar school, was one of Wales's great educationalists. And he runs that school for the next 20, 30 years as if it's an Eton. And in very many senses, Barry, I do think, was one of the most important schools in Wales for over a generation.
Richard Evans.
One of the school's most famous old boys was Gwynfor Evans, son of Dan Evans, owner of the town's department store. Born in Barry 100 years ago in 1912, he became Plaid Cymru's first MP when he famously won the Carmarthen by-election in 1966. Another Barry institution was founded in the same year as Gwynfor Evans's birth. This is Jenner Park, home of Barry Town Football Club. Founded in 1912, they were regular winners of the Welsh League and Cup. But their most memorable games were reserved for European competition, like the time they beat Portuguese giants Porto 3-1 in the Champions League.
Certainly at the moment they're playing with a great deal of pride. And there's another opportunity as well! And the header goes in under the head! The goal is scored by Mike Flynn! And Barry Town lead the Portuguese side.
Since then, well, it has been a struggle, with the ownership of the club changing hands several times. Now, it's the supporters who run the club, and everyone here hopes that the good times will return. The town of Barry has also suffered its ups and downs. The docks went into slow decline after the Second World War, and the railway became better known as a graveyard for steam engines. From 1959, Geest did import bananas to Barry from the West Indies, but it left in the 80s. Where there were once thousands of ships, nowadays the arrival of one boat can be seen as a bit of an event. But the docks are by no means dead. The long-standing Dow Corning Chemical Works employs 600 people, and its products still go through the docks to far-flung destinations. And Barry, like docklands everywhere, has its waterfront developments. And so it is that the coal trucks have been replaced by supermarket trolleys. And where they used to rumble by, there are now car parks and balconies. Barry Island also suffered. Butlins finally closed in 1996. The pleasure park is a shadow of its glory days, with the famous log flume now closed down, no longer ringing with the screams of terrified day trippers. But just when it seemed that Barry was no more than a faded postcard of holidays past, it was given a new moment in the sun. Yes, Gavin and Stacey, Essex Boy Meets Barry Girl, one of the most popular British comedies in recent years. You can feel its effect everywhere. And once again, people are coming from all over the world to visit film locations here on the island and in town. This is number 47 Trinity Street, home of Stacey's mum, Gwen. It's only small, but it's one of the biggest tourist attractions in Barry.
Tell me tomorrow, I'll wait by the window for you.
When Glenda Kenyon's house became a key location for the series, she couldn't have imagined how it would change her life. Oh my word, look at this. Glenda, this is your shrine to Gavin and Stacey.
Yes.
This is a museum, it's a shrine, it's a place of pilgrimage.
Yes.
They come and they sign?
Yeah.
Do you count them in? Do you know how many come?
Yes. I'm up to 10,185 people in.
It is. I mean, there are people from all over the world.
Australia, India, Africa, New Zealand, London, Bristol, my state.
Essex?
Yep.
Hiya, Mum. Hiya, love. Was that Doris out? Yeah. How's her leg? Fine. What's this top? TK Maxx, £5 down from 10. Can't go wrong. Fancy an omelette? Aye, go on then. Les will be here at 6. Will she want an omelette? I don't know.
I guess this is it.
Famous frying pan.
Do you use it?
Not for omelettes.
Oh, hi, Ness.
All right, Bryn.
How's it going down the slots?
I won't lie to you, Bryn. I hate it. Barry Island's not what it used to be, but what can you do? Times change. People move on.
But Gavin and Stacey has changed Barry, bringing tens of thousands of new visitors in its wake. And now, with talk of plans to demolish the old fun fair and replace it with a new leisure complex, people here are positive about the future.
I'm back where I started, on the floor, talking to people, and the amount of different accents I am hearing now. Japan, Australia, Germany, Ireland, all over, which before we never used to hear.
Barry Island's back on the map, and we'll benefit from that for a number of years. It depends on what happens with the developments around on Barry Island, the fairground, the old Butlin site, but hopefully something positive will happen there, and we'll be here for another 50 odd 60 years.
Well, what's next now is to make Barry Island an experience. There's a lot of planning, there's a lot of money want to be invested in this island. We've got the roads, we've got the railways, we've got the infrastructure. People are interested and want to invest on Barry Island. So it's got to be a winner.
Barry's heyday, those extraordinary years at the end of the 19th century, when entrepreneurial drive could lead to fortunes being made through coal, or could lead to this place becoming a paradise for day trippers, well, those days are gone. But Barry is more than just hanging on in there. Something has been born again here. And, well, Barry and its island are happening places. Things are occurring here once more.
Next Tuesday's Town is Carmarthen, same time, 25 to 11. And another new series tomorrow night looks at how our family life is changing in the 21st century through 8 personal stories. Wales in a Year starts at 8 o'clock.